Hey viewers, my name's Cara, and today I'm going to talk about something that I've talked about several times before, but I just got another question about it. The link will be in the description. I just read this earlier today, so I've only given it several hours more thought, but this is something that I've talked about several times before. I've mentioned it in videos on my channel and on Pagan Perspective, and I think I've even tweeted about it in the past, so this is by no means something that I've never put thought toward before. But I thought I would address it again because while I initially answered this person on Twitter and I said my thoughts really haven't changed on it, I still don't have an answer. I don't have an answer still, but I do have a few more thoughts, sort of, that what they said brought up, and I did tweet this back to them, but I thought I would expand a little bit. So this is about the sort of seeming disconnect between the fact that I prefer to be called a female actor, and yet I use terms like god and goddess. And I do usually point this out or talk about this almost every time that I make a big mention about the fact that I prefer to be called a female actor as opposed to an actress. I usually do then bring up, but I don't know why it doesn't bother me when other forms are used, etc. So let's just talk about that for a bit. I call myself a female actor because in my undergraduate theater department, we referred to each other as actors. And that was partially to make no distinction between what the men did and what the women did, and to put us on an equal footing. So that was just used to emphasize the fact that we're all doing the same thing. It's not a male versus female thing. We're all doing the same work, learning the same things. And in fact, we played roles that were intended for the opposite gender. And I just stuck with that because I prefer to be called an actor. I feel like that's what I am. There are some people out there who prefer to be called actress, and that's their thing. There are some award shows now, however, that do have categories of best male actor and best female actor. There are other award shows that still have best actor, best actress. So it depends on who you talk to whether or not the change has been made, but I prefer to call myself a female actor. I'm not a huge history person, so I don't know this for sure, but I could imagine that at one point actress was a huge source of pride because there used to only be male actors originally. And so I'm sure that when females started acting, it was nice to have a separate term and say, no, I am that. But it is a diminutive form of the word, and I don't understand why we do it with some things in our society in the English language and we don't do it with others. For example, we don't call a female doctor a doctoress. We don't call a female engineer an engineeress. Professors and teachers are professors and teachers, not teacheress and professoress or professorette. Those are diminutive terms. Those are terms meant to make it sound smaller, less than. Similarly, we don't have separate diminutive terms for male or female mechanic, cashier, truck driver or bus driver, coach, bartender, broker, things like that. We don't have separate terms for them. So why do we have words like actress and waitress? Some words, however, still evoke a gender in our society. Like school teachers used to be mostly women, while college professors used to be mostly male. Similarly, when you think of the word nurse, most people picture a woman, whereas doctors used to be mostly male. That's not the case anymore, however. Well, they might be. I don't know the actual ratio, but it's much more common for us to have female doctors and female professors and male school teachers and male nurses. So I feel like now that kind of thing is not as prevalent. We've gotten used to that over time as people have stepped up and filled those roles. So personally, I think of an actor as a person who acts. However, if you don't like actor because that says male to you and you want something even more neutral, you could go with performer or thespian. A nurse is one who nurses, or if that even still is too evocative of a female role, would go with something like caregiver. I think that technically those are separate things and you get a degree in nursing versus, but I mean, as far as what you call people, there are other words that we can use. Instead of using waiter or waitress, I call myself a server. What I do at the tea parlor is I serve people. So that's what we all call my position at work. My bosses call me a server. They say, your server will be right with you. People that I serve will sometimes refer to me as a waitress. I'll walk by and I'll hear them say, oh, I'll have to get the waitress on her way back. I always introduce myself as, my name is Cara, I will be your server today. But people fill in whatever they think is the proper term. As far as what we prefer to be called and what we choose to call other people, it's just an equality issue. So the person who asked me this question talked about why, if I prefer to be called an actor, what about terms like god and goddess? And they skipped this in between that I usually touch on, so I will go ahead and take a step in between there. Priest and priestess. Why doesn't it bother me that those two terms exist? I don't know. I recognize the disconnect here. I've talked about it numerous times. I don't know why. I don't like actress, but priestess is okay and goddess is okay. I don't really know, but I have a few thoughts about why. For one, there is this really heavy weight attached to words like God and priest, and I think that it does something for us on a spiritual level, or on a level of bringing spirituality into society. It does something for us to have priest balanced with priestess. And it's important to me to emphasize the feminine characteristics of priestessing in its own light. And at least to me, again, I'm not big on history, I don't know the little particulars of how it evolved over time, but to me, in my practice and what I've been taught, a priest and a priestess are seen as equals. There is no inherent above or below within that. So while it is a feminine or a diminutive ending on priestess, which is usually used to signify something being less than, I don't get the impression when we talk about a priest and a priestess that one is above or below the other. To me, there is an equal power and authority associated with being a priestess as there is to being a priest. Now, if there were a religion that used mostly priests or any other, word that means male clergy person, if those religions started allowing female priests or clergy persons, but insisted on calling them priestesses, then that might give us a little more of a feeling of, well, the priests are still here, but the priestesses they're allowed, but they're below. That would give me a little more feeling of one being above the other. But as it is in my practice, in a pagan point of view, from my path at least, I don't know about what other paths call their clergy. To me, they are seen as equal, so it doesn't bother me as much to have that difference in terminology. However, there are also other neutral nouns, if someone would prefer, and I've heard people call themselves these other things that are neutral, and I've thought to myself, well, what's the difference between being a priest or a priestess and being these other things? So some of them that I've seen are devotee, servant, worshiper, follower, child, as opposed to son or daughter of the deity that you choose. So I think it's whatever suits your relationship to divinity, because to me there is a difference between being a servant and a devotee and etc. And I've had this conversation with Chris before, actually. But the point being, there are different words that, depending on what suits your path and your relationship to divinity, there are words that you could use that would be gender neutral. And then taking that a step further into the god-goddess divide, again, I don't know if anyone ever used goddess to imply that female divinity was inferior to male divinity. But in my path, that's not how they're used. I don't know of anyone that uses them in that way now. I never thought about this questioner was pointing out how they understand, like, when we're talking about a specific deity or addressing a deity, we would say something like, for example, the goddess Athena, and they understand that because that's like part of their name. I never really considered that at all. I just think of it in the sense of it being a title, for example, I guess. And so similarly with the priest-priestess thing, there, like I said, is a certain weight attached to the word God that in this society is so male and means so much that I think that we benefit in a spiritual sense from having the terms God and goddess and showing balance and equality between two opposite but not opposing forces. So why not just say male and female gods? Again, because of the weight that is carried by the word God, and so many people automatically associate it with masculine, which I know not all of us do, again, as the questioner mentioned. I think all of us in this community tend to repeat this over and over, that masculine doesn't always mean male, feminine doesn't always mean female. But because there is that weight attached to the word, I personally feel that saying male and female gods would be like ushering all of the female divinity into this corral that is labeled masculine by most people. And why should they have to be? Granted, some goddesses are masculine and some gods are feminine, but as far as the language goes, it evokes this sense of all of them have to go with the masculine form. Like in the French language, a lot of things are, if you have a group of all men, you refer to them by the male pronoun. If you have a group of all women, you refer to them by the female pronoun. But as soon as you have men and women together, the male pronoun is the default, takes precedence, and the women are just kind of ushered into the male category because the men take over. The men are predominant. The presence of males, even if it's 15 women and 1 man, you have to use the male version because that man takes precedence. And that, to me, is what it would be like if we insisted on saying male and female gods. But when I personally am not talking about specific gods and specific goddesses, I do tend to use the neutral terms deity or divinity. I'm sure there are others. Please share them if you know other neutral terms for that. But I tend to go with deity when I'm talking about just the overall presence of deity. That's what I go with. And then God and goddess specifically. So to me, it's important in my path to keep both, to show the balance and to acknowledge the two different sides that do balance each other out. To me, it's symbolic of the way that the universe works. So I use one or the other or both or neither as fits the situation at hand. Calling myself an actress, however, wouldn't be symbolic of how theater works, in my opinion, because theater is not about you have the men and you have the women. It's about you have a cast of equal individuals who are all performing their equal duty. And while I don't think I'm going to start using the word performer, to me, actor is that neutral term. It doesn't have as much of a masculine influence to me as it probably does to the rest of society, because that's just how it was with my teaching. It's how my degree program worked. But I absolutely recognize that it's kind of weird that I want to be called an actor, but I'm okay with goddess and priestess. I recognize that. I've talked about it before. I still don't have an absolute answer, but I hope that some of these different thoughts have helped you see sort of my thought process and how I work things out in my head. So in some cases, I certainly think that getting rid of language and terminology that does imply superiority, inferiority type relationships is helpful and important to get rid of those. But I also think that we're capable of taking it too far and completely diminishing what it means to be part of an individual identity. The multicultural approach does more for prejudice reduction than does the colorblind approach, meaning that the approach where we recognize all the different individual disparate parts for what they are and what they bring to the table reduces prejudice more than the approach where we, so to speak, don't even see color, because that's diminishing the identities and blending them all together. However, I am also glad that there are neutral nouns and pronouns for times that they work the best. So all these different words exist. I think it's just important to come up with which ones we're the most comfortable with and know what each person prefers to use when you're dealing with an individual basis. So we have this language at our hands, we have these different terms, use them as you will. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. And until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.